Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today to watch this. This is going to be one of the most incredible videos you'll ever watch in your life, and you're going to want to share it with everybody. These are some of the most exceptional people that I know of on the planet now. They are fighting a noble fight, and these guys are the warriors of today, and this is what we can all aspire to be, is like these guys, because these guys are seriously badass. They are called the Americans in Action. Is it americansinaction.net?
.info.
.info. Okay, I knew there was a dot something that was different than com. Okay. So americansinaction.info, if you want to learn more about them as we go along, I'm sure you will. I promise you will. Especially what's going on in our world right now is so crazy. And these guys are going to really help put it in perspective for us, all that's going on. Now, one thing that I've noticed about this great awakening that we're going through is you have the side of those that are inner awakening and those that are more focused on the outer. So those that are fighting and they're guarding themselves and they're closing their windows off and they're just like, those sons of guns, they rah, 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 because they know what's going on. And then there's the other side that is saying, wow, I better wake up within me, and I better, see what I need to heal within myself and see what is out there is reflecting me. So you have both camps going. But ideally, I think it's a good idea to be aware of all of this and also guard yourself with proper supplements and take really good care of your body and all of that, and become sovereign and strive for sovereignty and take all the actions that we can in the physical, but also keep an importance of the utmost on our spiritual aspect over here as well, and do the healing. Because if you're over here just in that camp, you're really not awakening. You're really not going through the full way. You know what's going on, but that's an entirely different thing. So what do you guys have to say about that, first and foremost?
I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because a great part of what we do, and the first thing we do anytime we do workshops around the country, is we talk about your relationship with God or the kingdom of heaven. Now, when we mention the kingdom of heaven, that certainly also can be referred to as living in the private. But on the spiritual side of it,
Wow.
it is something completely different. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and it's very important to realize it if you want to stay, let's say, very potent in your life itself. So the kingdom of heaven is something that's here. It's here. It exists in here, not here. And so many people stay here and they can never experience the kingdom of heaven truly. So So what we do is that, especially the most powerful law that we have uncovered and has been extremely successful, so far 100% successful out of all the cases we've been doing, and that's trust law, which comes from the Bible. Now, the Bible, as we look at it, is a little bit different than a lot of people look at it. We look at it as mainly a law book, and because it's written in code, and that's where we found trust law. And it's really amazing how it coincides with everything that we do in how we teach people to stand. We're not attorneys in any way, shape, or form. Matter of fact, we can bring up the bar system in itself later on and the corruption there. But in the situation of standing, we teach people to stand on their own. They must learn how to stand. It's a whole completely different thing. We're used to hiring a bar attorney and giving our power of attorney away. We're used to hiring doctors outside of ourselves. Everything is for somebody else to do. Living in the kingdom of heaven and having that awareness and consciousness is you. You are your teacher. You are your winner. You're the one you're looking for, because nobody else is going to take care of it for you. It's a misnomer that Gesera Nasera or Trump or whatever else is going to handle everything. It ain't going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about you. Now, when you're in the kingdom of heaven, that's a transference from your consciousness of living in the public on the political side. And the same thing is living in your head. living in your intellect to figure everything out. And you can't figure out God. You can't figure out kingdom of heaven because it's beyond the mind. It's beyond the thinking. Did you know that thoughts are physical? They register on an electrometer, on a lie detector test, and that's how they find out if you're lying or not. If you have a thought and you go, oh, I took that $5, and they go, did you take that $5? The energy that goes up your left hand and goes across the feeling factory, if you have a thought, which is physical, it blocks the energy and the needle rocks and they know you're lying. And so that's how it works. And so now that's important to realize, because in the kingdom of heaven, in reality, you have no thought. You're at one with the universe. You're at one with whatever you want to call it, God. You're at one with exactly who you are, a child of God. And so in that child of God, I was thrown a little bit. I was looking at you on the big screen, Amy, and all of a sudden Jason comes up. There you go. Jason, don't say anything. Anytime you move,
I changed.
Okay.
That's a good sign. I'm turning into Jason. I would love that.
All right.
Maybe not physically, but
right.
I want to download all of his information.
There you go. Yeah. The whole crew is brilliant. We really know how to live the wisdom. We know about form, and we talk about often in the court systems to that substance supersedes form. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if you know who you are, that is the most powerful stance that anyone could be, because that overrides all form. We've even had situations where the person, pardon the expression, actually messed up all of the talking, the form, when they were dealing with the court system situation, yet their substance was so powerful, they were still living in the kingdom of heaven, and the case was dismissed. We have cases like that. So it's really, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be at one with yourself. When you are totally in the intellect, you have abandoned yourself. It's really interesting, the whole concept. So you're separate from you, which makes you a duality, and you're split. And that is how you are not potent. That's how things go rocky in the world. So you must realize who you are. So like when I say to you, Amy, who are you? What's your answer?
Who I truly am is in the present moment when holding hands with God.
Good.
It's the essence. It's the essence of who I am. Yeah.
Good.
I mean,
so
okay.
That means you're a child of God.
Absolutely.
There you go. So a lot of people don't realize that, and they think they are the straw man. They think they are the vessel, the all caps name. All three of those things, same thing, right? So they think they're that, and anything coming from commerce, anything coming from the public, anything coming from Admiralty Law, the Water District, the same thing, right? Actually, they're really talking to, it seems like it's you, but it's not. Mm-hmm. It's the all caps name. If you really get that, then what happens is you realize that any citation, any mortgage, any buy your car, anything at all that is given to you from commerce is going to be your all caps name. Isn't that interesting? Now that if you really get that, that changes the whole game. But a lot of people in the beginning, they get back and forth and they forget that they're child of God. And if that happens in a court situation, you lose because they're addressing the all caps name. If you can maintain being in the kingdom of heaven, that's a consciousness, like you were saying, Amy. That's a consciousness and an awareness. You are in the kingdom of heaven, and nothing can move you out of that. Nothing the judge says, nothing a citation does, nothing at all. You still remain in the kingdom of heaven. That is your power. That's the most important thing on any forms you may file in doing anything. What's that? Well, let's say you get a citation and you want to rescind that. Let's say you're in the court and they're trying to extort money. Now, I want to make a point here. We don't really assist any criminals that have hurt people or destroyed any property. We feel that they must make restitution. And that's the most important. That's God's law, it really is. And so take care of your neighbor, right? And so with that, only people that have been accused of fraud, not they were fraud, but the citation is fraud, the trying to extort money, take your land, fraud, right? They're the ones that we assist to stand. And it's so amazing.
Taxes. Taxes are a fraud.
They are. That's a little bit of a different kind of.
Not if you consent. That's the whole key right there. They trick you.
Well, that's exactly right, because they think they don't know who they are. So you volunteer for all this. Do you know that it takes 3 signatures for anyone to go to prison? 3 signatures in court. If you have a court case, it takes 3 signatures, otherwise they can't jail you. Who has those 3 signatures? Well, the judge has one. Prosecutor has the other. Who has the third? You do, unless you hire a bar attorney. Then you give away that vote, that signature, right? And you give it to a stranger that is going to betray you in most cases and sign off, so you do go to prison. Because something happens when a person, pardon the expression, the people go to prison, and even in the court system itself, is they're making tens of thousands of dollars pulling it from your trust. And so they want you to lose. Their predetermined outcome is that you lose, and now they're making sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just horrendous what goes on, and nobody tells you, and a lot of people don't know about it. So anyway, back to the spiritual in itself.
And according to them, we are just a trust. I mean, even our marriage is money. It's a transaction. Marriage, divorce, all the contracts.
In actual fact, they consider us to be a corporation. If anyone calls you a person means corporation. And Ananda will go over that later, the importance of words, because we developed a dictionary called A Dictionary That Can Save You Life, because they have their own language. They have the legalese, and we think we know what they're talking about, but we don't. And that's why they declare us to be stupid and incompetent. And we are, because we didn't put it together that they do have a whole different language. You know, even like the word mortgage, it means death pledge. The word judge means banker. The word resident, what does that mean, Ananda, resident?
Someone who is there temporarily to do business. So when they say, oh, do you reside there? No, I live here. I don't reside here. I'm not here temporarily to do business. That's ridiculous. So they try to contract you and get you to believe that you're engaging in commerce at all times by using words like drive rather than travel, reside rather than live or inhabit, which was actually biblical. We're inhabitants of the earth. They make it sound like we're uncivilized.
Right. Can you imagine? So we comprise this book with over 200 or 300 of the legalese, so that you get to know what they're saying to you, which is extremely important. It's a whole different language. Yes.
If most people watching this right now have never, ever even signed a legitimate contract in their lives.
That's right. Exactly.
Because contract, just the first, I mean, there's just a whole list of what actually makes a contract. But one of those things on there is that you actually know all the writing and what it says in there, and you agree about it. That's right. But so nobody ever reads it and agrees.
It's true. It's true. I mean, so many people sign something and they have no idea what they're signing, and they just put themselves in jail. It's just a crazy thing. You have to realize the game and everything that's going on. And so just to finish up a bit about the kingdom of heaven, again, is a consciousness. It's a place that you experience yourself extremely calm, centered, loving, amazing. and you're so grateful and you have so much compassion for others, it is an amazing place to be. And now, probably some of us, maybe all of us, have experienced it one time or another, but we have to live in it 100%. And that's when all the information that we have extracted from Genesis, from the Bible, that are trust law, can be in its full force. Isn't that something? Isn't that amazing? So there it is, the kingdom of heaven. So anytime we say kingdom of heaven, we mean living in the private. Same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So on that note, I I broke out and became a private membership association.
PMA.
A private membership association. Can you explain to our audience what does that mean? What did I do?
So, well, let me find out, because not all PMAs are equal.
Okay.
All right. So with the PMA itself, what do you think? How did you do that? Did you do anything with commerce with your PMA?
I became as a private membership association, everybody has to join. I went through the freedompeople.org, and everyone has to become a member in order to be a part of the association. So I don't do any dealings with anyone who isn't a living, breathing soul.
Right. So in that organization, do they have you file anything?
It's mine.
With commerce?
No, it's all completely private.
Well, that's excellent, because that's the kind that we'd really talk about. Jay, you want to say a few words on this PMA?
Sure. Okay. What Krista's getting to is two types of PMAs. One is a statutory compliant PMA, which if let's say a bar attorney helps you draft up a PMA, he's going to put in state codes, he's going to put in possibly county codes, things of that nature.
No, none of that. None of that nonsense.
Good.
No.
Good. An example of something like that.
I didn't know there was one of those PMAs.
Oh, there is. There's about 5 different types of PMAs.
Oh my gosh.
The other thing is nonprofits.
There's one quick thing. There's also statutory compliant trusts, which are said to be double-minded, because a trust is a higher jurisdiction than the statutory laws and codes, which is considered, in my opinion, a lower law, because they have to yield to the higher law. So it's pretty interesting if you catch one of those.
Okay, go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Also, you can see that illustrated in what people think that they have a nonprofit organization, but there's a nonprofit organization like a 501c3, and then there's a real nonprofit organization, which is a 5081c. And we won't get too much into it, but the difference is a 501c3 basically is still statutory compliant, and the GOV can simply come in and still audit your stuff, and you still have to be compliant even if you're a church and you file under 501c3. So during the time of the pandemic over there, the reason a lot of the churches were closing down is because they were 501c3, so they had to abide by some of these quote unquote mandates because they weren't completely nonprofit or in the private, whereas a 508c1a is a completely different structure where it is much more private. And then there's other PMAs, and then there's ministerials and things of that nature where you can be completely in the private, and then there's no jurisdiction from any outside organization or corporation that you're contracted with. It's just like what Krista was saying, all admiralty jurisdiction, everything in Babylon. We like to say that there's 2 jurisdictions on the planet, Kingdom of Heaven and everything else, which would be Babylon. Babylon is all contractual. Contract is also private, but it's all based on consent in Babylon, informed consent, and all, like what you were just saying, there's many different elements of a contract, which we go over in our workshops, but you have to be completely informed, and there has to be a meeting of the minds, and the meeting of the minds is the most essential thing, because contract can only happen with like parties. In other words, an all caps with an all caps. or a living with a living. A living
Right.
cannot contract with a non-living. There's a thing called doctrine of parity, which basically means it's an impossibility for two things that are not of the like nature to contract. So we go
So that
into that in
means,
detail.
let me just say this, Jay. That means that a child of God cannot contract with anything that's commerce.
That's right.
Go ahead, Jay.
That's right. Yeah. So when you were saying earlier that most people don't even hadn't had a valid contract, well, the reason why they haven't had a valid contract, forget about all the elements of a contract. They haven't had a valid contract because they were under the false pretense that they thought they were somebody who was signing that contract other than who they truly are. In other words, they didn't know who they were. As a result of that, for the last 200 years plus, this thing called Babylon has been able to exist under false pretense. And so now what we help people through a spiritual awakening, help them remember who they are, and then all the legal or lawful or any of the forms that we do after that is a byproduct of them realigning to the, like Krista was saying, the kingdom of heaven within, who they truly are, and then everything else follows suit. And now you're not putting yourself into a jurisdiction that doesn't apply to you. And so it's a pretty exciting journey because its foundation is spiritual awakening, and then everything else follows suit because the
Now,
kingdom of heaven is always here.
it's
You just
true.
have to remember how to enter it.
It's very important to realize, because when we speak about this, all of a sudden we get questions. Well, how do we get into the kingdom of heaven? Well, one thing that is very important to realize is that in the kingdom of heaven, truly, everything that is around you is you. And so for that to happen, I give you an example. Let's say that someone's going to, direct them to file a form, a certain thing, right? We say, before you do that, I want you to look up every word. And the reason for that, and I'm talking about every word. You think you know the meaning of the, of, for, is, so forth and so on, all those prepositions? You'd be amazed when you start looking them up and what they really mean. And so every single word on that paper, what happens if you don't do that, you are still separate from it. If you look up every word and you know it, something magical happens. You are one with that. And that's the power right there. If you ever see somebody making a speech and they have notes, they're in their head. It's not from them really. The one that really gives you a speech and it comes from the heart in the moment, that's the trueness of it, because they're one with whatever they're talking about. Isn't that something? So we have to change the way that we do things, and it takes more responsibility to be more responsible, to live in the kingdom of heaven. There's responsibility and there's action as well. And so if you want to become one with everything, anything, then enter into the kingdom of heaven, you want to look at your scenario and you want to ask yourself, what am I feeling in the presence of this citation? What am I feeling in the presence of this arrest? What am I feeling in the presence of anything that's around you? And allow yourself to be one with the emotion, the energy and motion, the emotion of every situation. And if you do that to completion, to fruition, guess what happens? The thinking mind shuts off and you enter into the kingdom of heaven. Another words for those are transcending third dimension, transcending commerce, transcending your straw man, transcending everything that is outside of yourself. And all of a sudden now you find yourself inside. That is the power. That is one with your creator. That you will have so much confidence, calmness, power, the quiet power, not false power, yelling and screaming and performing anger. No, power is love, the power of love, right? So it's when a person gets that and approaches that, they are totally successful in everything they do, and miracles happen. Matter of fact, that's the only place miracles do happen, is when you're in the kingdom of heaven. I hope we answered it a little bit.
Well, and commerce is like being in that transactional world of Babylon. And it's funny when you say Babylon, it was the first time I've ever heard it like babble on.
Yeah.
Because they're not paying any attention. They're just blah, 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 believe this, blah, 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 babbling.
We love breaking down words like that. Exactly. Nana's really good at that, breaking down words and, just coming up with, oh my God, what does it really mean? Like standing, yeah? Or do you understand? You never say to them that you understand. Ever.
Understand.
Understand. Yeah.
I always use
Amy
understand and I do blessings instead of blessings because that's be blessed.
Good. I love that.
I love it. I love it. Amy and I were talking the other day, and we were talking about becoming energized. So when we go, instead of a timeout, we take a time in. And then when we're in, we're doing breathing, meditating, what have you, we become energized. So it's just, it can get really fun.
I know. And
I
instead
came
of
up with a new one.
Good morning turns into like happy new day. Happy new day to you.
Yay, let's celebrate the day. I love that. Oh, it's so true.
And Amy, with this, when you're in the kingdom of heaven and you're doing your forms and this and that, you actually get higher in a kite and it becomes fun. And it's really important to approach any of this at all. Anything that comes into your space, that comes into your life, and you have to handle it, always approach it with enthusiasm. You know where the word enthusiasm comes from? It's a Greek word meaning called enthu, and it means with God. So anytime that you do anything with enthusiasm, you're bringing God consciousness, Christ consciousness into it.
I love that.
Isn't that
I
great?
love that because one of their tactics is to bully and scare us.
That's
like
right.
when a cop pulls us over, our heart's like, what are they going to do to us? What am I going to say back? And all that kind of stuff.
Well, what?
Or facing the courts or whatever. And if we go with enthusiasm,
that's right. No,
then we change the energy.
Two things on that. I'm glad you mentioned that. One, it used to be that way for me personally. If a cop stops now I look forward to it if they ever do. And since I've been doing that, a cop hasn't stopped me in like 7 years or something. It's like pretty crazy, but because it's here, not here. And this is knowing. This is a mind intellectual understanding. You're still separate from the information. If it's here, it's one with. And that's the key. One with on that. I was going to say something else with that. You mentioned being stopped by the cop, this and that. Oh, the court system. We don't go to court any longer. As a matter of fact, if you step in the boards of the court, you're in treason. If you live in the private and you're a child of God, if you know who you are. So we handle everything administratively. And it's so interesting with that. As soon as you respond to, let's say they send a citation or they send some summons or whatever, as soon as you respond to it, they can't do anything else because that is, what is that called, Jay? As soon as you start to, things are going
like a war rant, for example.
Yeah, I say
warrant.
Jay, what is that?
Yeah. Because it's all admiralty. And as soon as you respond to whatever their offer is, and the offer is simply come into our court with this citation or this summons or whatever it is that they've submitted to you through the mail or whatever it is, it's an offer. And as soon as you respond to that, the most simple way to describe it is you're in negotiations. And as a result of you being in negotiations, it's like an estoppel. And as a result of you being in negotiations, no further action to definitive outcome can be a result because you're negotiating. It's kind of like, I like to use the analogy because both Ananda and I were in real estate until we found out what real estate really was. And we said, well, we don't want to be a part of that anymore. But in real estate, I like to use the analogy to describe this because when you put an offer onto a house, right, you have a 30-day escrow period, right? And then within that escrow period, you're in negotiations. And then the final outcome of the party moving into the house, the other party moving out, is all contingent upon, is the inspection going to go well? Is the money going to clear? And then they have a way to get out of it and all these different things. So there's basically like a freeze in the action as all these other things are going on. And then there's a time machine on it. If we don't resolve the matter, if we don't fulfill the contract by X amount of day, then the person in the house gets to stay in the house, and the buyer has to go another way, or it falls through or it goes through. So it's the same thing in anything. They send you, if you ever look at any ticket they give you, it's a contract. They a machine give you the terms, they tell you what to do, then you can say, I agree or I don't agree. I consent or I don't consent. I negotiate or not negotiate, or reject it or not. And there are ways to do it so that you stay what we call in honor, and that you are in you're specific about what your terms are. And that way, the process is on freeze until there's a resolve. And then when the resolve is happening, ideally, it's you go your way, they go their way. It's all just a contract, and they know it. And you have to learn how to operate and navigate through that Babylon so that you can be free in Babylon by staying connected with the kingdom of heaven.
That's so beautiful. What does somebody do? Like, I know a single father with his children that were taken and taken to the state. What does somebody do if they have something like that going on?
You meaning like a child custody situation type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the premise is this. Remember, Babylon only works in the shadow, right? Legal fiction, right? So it wasn't his kids that were taken away, right? And we won't go too much into it, but it wasn't his kids. It was the piece of papers that are identifying as his kids. Because if the courts are involved, right? And if it sounds like they are, and if there's a spouse or an ex-spouse involved, it's all on paper. It's all the legal fiction that was created on paper. But the actual living man with his offspring, which is his property, which is his son and daughter, kind of like God has sons and daughters, right? And we're made in the image of God. Therefore, we would have sons and daughters, not childs, or not kids, or not anything that they put on a piece of paper. So the way you get around that is to know who you are, know how to navigate within the system through your administrative process to delineate the parties in specificity, meaning this is what you think you have possession of on your paper, and here's what the reality is. And we will know how to decipher that on paper. So now there's no contract. So therefore, he gets to retain the ownership of his property called his offspring, son and daughter.
But there's one thing, Jay, when you bring out here with that, and that thing is that we have to realize if you remain a ward of the state, if you remain in commerce, then you don't own your children. You don't own your business. You don't own your land. The state does. And that's why the state can take them at any time and will take them if you try to stand and you don't do it properly. You don't actually come from the kingdom of heaven. A lot of people attempt, and that's another thing we say to them, to anyone. You need to know the information and be one with it for it to be potent. Because this way, if anybody asks you anything right on the spot, you're going to have the correct answer. And oftentimes the correct answer is something so different than what you would ever answer in the consciousness that you are now. So your whole consciousness changes, but you must just realize that the state took the place of God. That's what they wanted to do. So that the state, they want you to honor the state, and the state is everything. The state owns everything. So of what has been true in God's creation of planet Earth and the whole thing is that they put on everything that God created, they put their fictitious commerce over top of it. And that's why people get confused. If you deal with them acknowledging this, then you stay in that, and you're going to wind up with a predetermined outcome, which means you're going to pay a huge fine or go to jail. But you got to realize that we're lifting the veil. We're lifting that fictition off so the kingdom of heaven is apparent and existing. And in that, because it's superior, that jurisdiction of the living in the private, living in the land, living in the kingdom of heaven is superior to anything that is commerce. In the court system, in everything we do, they have to yield to anyone that truly lives in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, truly knows who they are. And they will trick you and try to get you off of that. And if you do one word, you either say one word or don't say the right word, you're back in
They
their
got you.
jurisdiction. Right.
Mhm.
So, and they try to do it in so
Right.
many different ways. Go ahead, A.
It was just thinking about the word children, and they use the word minor in that situation. And so what has happened is that through the doctrine of parents patriae, the state is claiming to be the parents of the children. And they actually are, because we accidentally, maybe our parents didn't realize, or as mothers didn't realize, and we signed as an informant the property that was birthed through the birth canal. You see, it's all water. The water broke, the product came out. It weighs 8 pounds 7 ounces. They're talking about their product. They're claiming, say, the Department of Human Resources. That's actually human trafficking. And so what's going on is that when the children are put through the system, if we don't come in, first we have to secure our oxygen mask and then help those around us. So what we help people to do is to help firstly secure your own oxygen mask. So in the case of the father, what I would recommend is for him to look into what it means to be living in the private. There's American state nationals that have gone on the record to declare and decree, I am not to be confused with the all caps name. I am not a vessel. I'm not a corporation, as the word person would indicate. I'm a people, not a person, right? So then as he does that and he enters into the private, now he can develop his standing. If we don't correct our status, we have no standing, because the courts will continue to assume us to be chattel property. They see us as that all caps name. Now remember that whoever owns title owns the products listed in the trust, or the title, if you will. That certificate, that birth certificate, is saying that a container that holds liquid, that's how they refer to our God-given bodies, a container that holds liquid is owned by the state. So if we don't come back in and claim and declare and decree, no, I'm not that, I'm this, I'm back to claim my minor estate. And what people think it's this windfall of money that they're going to claim their minor estate. They're going to have this millions of dollars land in their bank account. Now it might happen, I'm trying not to be a naysayer here, because maybe it will. However, greed never pays, okay? Just so anybody who's going after the trust to try to claim this holy grail that may or may not exist, that's the wrong thinking. That's stinking thinking, right? We got to get straight in our brains. It's about living in the private. I just want to live my life in peace, right? Quit harassing me. So after this man corrects his status, develops his standing, now he can go back in administratively and claim what is rightfully his. Because through what's a repudiation process, you can, and claiming your minor estate, you claim your property. So I'm claiming my body as my property, but I'm also claiming my offspring. This is my daughter, this is my son, and I can claim them as my property. And you do that within the law. peacefully, lawfully, kingdom of heaven. Standing doesn't mean fighting. And that's where people, they hit the hiccups because they go in, they want to fight for their rights. And in the kingdom of heaven, standing is different than fighting. So when we stand, sometimes we do need to be assertive. Sometimes the anger will come up, but we're not performing it per se in a way that's aggressive or unrealistic. Well, it may feel realistic to you. We always feel justified when we're angry, but when you develop your standing and you're remaining in honor in the kingdom of heaven, and you're speaking from a place of love, a place of knowing, because as we get to know ourselves, when we say standing in our knowing. When you're standing in your knowing, you're standing one with Creator. So even if you mess up on a few words, who are we to know every single legalese word? There's too many of them, right? But we know enough to know who we are. It's the essence. Remember, Christo said it's the substance over form. So that substance will convey. It's actually in your energy field. And instinct is recognized in the law. So when your instincts are good, you speak clearly, you know who you are. No, it's not this, it's this. I'm coming back to claim my property. I mean, no disrespect to anyone here. They have their systems set up, and their systems really aren't fraud in the bigger picture, because they set up their board game with their own rules, and we can choose to play by them or not. And when we opt out, she used to beat me Barbies when I wouldn't play with her. She'd get mad at me and try to force me to play Barbies with her, and I didn't want to play. But I don't have to play. Even if she's beating me with Barbies, I'm going to say, no thanks. I'm going into the kitchen and having some chips and salsa. So we do have the option to opt out. That's our consent, right? So when we don't consent any longer, then we're opting out.
Yeah, we were talking about even
so
in case of, yeah. And even in a case of, we were talking the other day about a divorce, like a messy divorce where, where they just, if you have a situation where the other person just absolutely will not cooperate and they're being totally greedy, like how do you get around if they're trying to go through commerce, if they're trying to go through the legal system, how does one, stay in their standing and not involve themselves with it when they have somebody holding even a child over their head, or, if you don't, then I'll do this, and threats and things like that. How do they stand against that? Just, I'm not going to participate. And then just,
Jay, you want to answer that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Jay, before you go, let me jump in real quick, because if you hire an attorney, you give up your rights. So you're actually better off. Your chances of winning in court, you're like, I think 60% higher chance is what I heard an expert tell me. 60% higher chance if you don't hire an attorney, if you go and stand and you speak. Because you give up your rights if you hire an attorney. So just, even if you don't know anything, just, your heart, go in and stand. You'll have a better chance at getting what you want.
Can you leave the
and
attorney?
the respect of the judge will go up.
Can you get rid of the attorney?
Absolutely,
Can you get rid
100%.
Okay. How do you do that?
I no longer need your services. Go ahead, Jay.
Just fire them. Okay.
Yeah, go
ahead,
it, Jay.
As a matter of fact, the premise is always very simple. It's about agreement and consent. So even if one spouse is in the court system with an attorney and the other spouse doesn't want to play the game, then there's no nexus for them to connect with, right? So I always like to use the analogy of the sandbox on the beach. Okay, there's a little boy or a little girl, whatever, who builds a sandbox on the beach, and he has all his shovels and buckets and things of that nature. And then everybody else is on the beach. And then here comes another little boy or girl, and he goes into the sandbox. And the first boy or girl that was in the sandbox built this really big sandcastle, and he's the king of the sandbox. And the other one that enters in says, well, I want to put this shovel. And the king of the sandbox says, no, that's my shovel. You get this broken one. And then they start dueling. And he goes, well, it's my sandbox. It's my sandbox. It's my sandbox. And then one day that little girl who went in to play wakes up and goes, wait, I can look over the top of the wall of this sandbox and I see this whole beach. So she exits the sandbox and plays in the entire beach. And then she now sees that the little boy in the sandbox is just a little boy in his little sandbox. And she has the choice to play in that sandbox or not. And if it's a mother, for example, she can say, that's great, little John, you can have your sandbox. I have the entire beach. So in the court system and in like the divorce situation, they're saying, you have to play with my shovel. You have to play with my shovel. Well, only in their sandbox. And agree that he's the hill. But all you
You're
have to
cutting
say
it.
is, guess
Okay,
what?
there we
The
go.
sand that you're using in that sandbox is from the beach. It's not even your. What's that? So
Oh, I said you're cutting out a
the
little bit. Okay.
analogy is
Yeah.
that even though they have their okay, the analogy is that even though they have their sandbox, the sand that they're using is part of the entire beach. They
Right.
are in the illusion that they own this little thing, and we're saying you can have your sandbox. We have the whole beach. So when it comes down to the divorce or whatever it is, anybody who's involved in that, they're just being offered to contract to play in that sandbox. And you can say, I don't want to. In other words, you have to create a nexus, a bridge, an agreement to play. And unless you volunteer to do that, then there is no way they have any authority at you. Now, if they're saying, well, we're going to do this with the kid, or we're going to do it they really can't technically do anything without the consent of people playing in the same sandbox. So
Ah.
like what Anata was just saying is if you decide to fight the whole thing and you get an attorney, well, basically you've now entered into their sandbox because that king of the sandbox over there has his agents that work for him. Those agents look like attorneys or law enforcement or policy enforcers or agents of the state. And anytime you contract with them, you're playing in that sandbox. But if you know who you are, that you have the entire beach and it's just little Johnny in his sandbox and all his toys, then you can say, that's fine, Johnny. I see what you're trying to do, but I'm going to stay on the beach. And then there's specific language, specific administrative processes that address that scenario where you're very clear and you're saying, no, I'm not in your sandbox. I'm on the beach. So there's no nexus. There's no bridge. Therefore, there's no authority or jurisdiction by your sandbox in my life, which is conjunction with whatever's in my life, meaning my child, my son, my daughter, my property, all these different things, right? So there are ways that you can navigate through Babylon and hold little Johnny in his sandbox and say, that's okay, Johnny, you can have your sandbox and you can throw your temper tantrum. You can keep trying to pull me into your sandbox with all the different things that you tried to do. But I'm going to stay here on the beach with all the grown-ups and all the people who can enjoy the sun, the surf, and your favorite frozen drink or whatever it is, right? So the whole point is, everything that's in that system, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a mortgage, whatever it is, right? It's still in that sandbox. And you don't have to play in that sandbox. And then what we help people do through the administrative process primarily, and then through the administrative process, they learn language, and then they learn how to remember who they are on the spiritual level, and then they can speak the language, write the language, and stand. Then they remember that they're on the beach and not in Johnny's sandbox. And now you know how to communicate, just like a mommy or a daddy communicates to Johnny in his sandbox and says, okay, stop your temper tantrum. You're going to have to go to sleep soon. And that's really what it is. They're like little angry kids, basically. And until you remember that, you think, not you, Amy, but people think that they're in that sandbox and they get caught up in the game of little angry kids playing until you grow up and you go, oh, I don't have to do that. Like you can go back in there and play if you're conscious of it and play with Johnny, but you don't have to stay there and think you are that because you can go, no, I'm done.
What Jay meant by that is going in to the sandbox again is you now know who you are and you're a child of God. Yet, let's say you have a social security payments. Let's say you have some sort of business that's in commerce. Well, you don't have to let that go. You can actually change your hat and be over there and receive the monies, and then you just return back into the kingdom of heaven. But it's very important to realize that if you stand, you're standing in what? The kingdom of heaven, the private, which is a total different jurisdiction than the court system, than commerce. So anything in commerce that they're throwing out has nothing to do with you, really.
Right.
Yeah, but with that, you must also realize that if they send you a form, you have to respond, because anything in court system, if it's even full of lies that is stated in court system, whether it's administratively or in person, if you do not debunk it, it stands as truth. So they could say 2 or 3 things that you did that you never did, but they said you did. If you don't debunk it, now it stands as truth, and that's how they get you. That's how they railroad you to a predetermined outcome. So you must realize that as well. So, but it's important for people to realize what it means to stay in the consciousness of the kingdom of heaven, because then there's no like. So there's no contract that's valid. If you go back into their jurisdiction, all of a sudden they got you. Because here's something else, and a lot of people freak out at this in the beginning until they realize what's really going on. All right, prepare yourself, Amy. The court does nothing wrong. The court is not involved with any fraud. That's the truth.
I'm so glad you said that.
What do you mean?
Let me finish. I'll let you go on. So we go to the court, and the first 2 things we say to them is, we come to you as a friend of the court. We are not an enemy of the state, nor do we participate with anyone that is. What is that to? Any judge that hears that in the beginning goes, oh, crap, I'm in trouble. Because his fictitious predetermined outcome to railroad you is now in jeopardy, because he's dealing with somebody that knows who they are. Isn't that interesting?
And they know this?
I'd say 95, well, I'd say about 95 to 100% of the judges do. And the attorneys, I'd say about 70 to 80% of the attorneys do. They know the corruption. They know that they're making money illegally, unlawfully.
And the tricks.
Yeah, and the tricks and everything else. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we have a story that we were having a workshop, and we had an ex-bailiff, I think bailiff, was it? Yeah, that actually was with us, and she told us a story that he was bringing something out, a court case or something like that, and she was laughing at it or something, and he said, "Don't you ever do that again. We cannot let them know our game." Because if this gets exposed of what it really is, it will go away. It's hiding it in the dark is where nobody knows what's going on. So how can you heal something that is, you don't know that it's broken? You know that something's off, but you don't know exactly what it is. So when you know exactly what it is, and then you live this wisdom, there's nothing really they can do. And they are freaking out. They're going crazy because they know it's the end of the game, and they're just trying to hold on to as much as they can. Isn't that something?
What is the bar?
British Accredited Registry. That's what it stands for. They are actually esquires. They even say it oftentimes, ESQ, at the end of their name. That's right beneath being a knight. So they are still aligned with the court system, with the crown, with the central banks. They're aligned to it. They are not, their oath is not to serve their client. It's to serve the state. Their oath is to be loyal to any one of that's bar, the judge's bar, the prosecutor's a bar. And that's why they always demand, you got to be represented by a bar attorney. Why? Because he's going to betray you. Because he's in collusion with the judge and the prosecutor, not letting you know. Here, give me $20,000, $30,000 and I'll betray you. So you'll lose. That's why
Mm-hmm.
so many people lose after giving tens of thousands of dollars to them, because it's all about the money and they're not really there to help their client. They're there to serve the state, and people have to realize this. Now, are there any bar attorneys around that, aren't doing that anymore? Yeah, probably. I maybe know one, maybe two, but there's no such thing also as a constitutional attorney. Once an attorney realizes the corruption of the bar, for them not to tear up their bar card, they're now in treason, because they are making money off of what? A corrupted ways and fraudulent ways called the bar. And so they must really tear up their bar card and become what we are, assistants of counsel, which you can find in the Sixth Amendment. Look it up, folks. Assistants of counsel. And we assist or counsel, we assist other people to stand properly with the proper forms. And of course, from us, we also deal with them on a spiritual level. As a matter of fact, Jay was just dealing with somebody the other day, I think. And if there is someone that isn't in the kingdom of heaven and don't get it, we really get worried for them. And we may not give them trust law, because if they're not in the kingdom of heaven utilizing trust law, they will fail. They'll do something that screws it up. Isn't that right, Jay? Ananda?
100%, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to, and again, knowing who you are with an energy, the substance. Even when you look up the word substance in a Black's Law dictionary, they literally define it. The first word is essence. It's essence. So they know
Wow.
that everything is from the fabric of God consciousness. They're just using it in a shadow way and hoping people don't wake up to that. So if you're made in the image of God, then you're the essence of that which is your creator. So they just took that whole concept, which is only the thing that exists, which is the only reality that exists, and they made a shadow of it. They created the all caps name. So that's a mirror image of the real. And what they say is that that which creates controls. So they don't want you to know that you're not that which they created, which was the all caps name, because if you knew that, then they couldn't control you. But they operate off of what's called the law of assumption. And unless you are aware of that, then it stands true, and you think you're that which they put on those documents, and therefore they've been going on for 200 plus in that because they create a fictional reality which isn't true. And if you participate in that game, then they have jurisdiction over you, right? So go back to the essence you are creating the shadow, then you can operating the highest jurisdiction, which is trust, which is the creator energy. But if you're not in that, and you're wobbling between thinking that you're this thing that you were indoctrinated with, and you're trying to use their rules while trying to live in a higher jurisdiction, you're already in conflict. So much so that if you take that conflict and you put it on a form, a document, form is a physical manifestation, call it a document, and you don't have the right substance, the energy, the creation from what made that form, then, and you present it, there's a presentment. When you present it to that whoever's receiving it, that substance, if it's convoluted in any way, that energy is convoluted, it'll backfire big time.
Wow.
So we steer people in a way of where they are in their journey, so that the ultimate goal is to be free. And there are many paths to that freedom that we can help with. But like what Chris was saying, the woman that we were helping the other day, she's still wobbling. And if you wobble on a false foundation, of course, by definition, you cannot stand on a faulty foundation. So it's going to hurt her. So that's why the energy, the trust, everything that we do is sacred. And when it's applied with sacredness and consciousness, let alone understanding, then the form doesn't matter, because even in their old world, they say substance over form, which by definition is the essence of who you are standing, and then everything else follows suit. And they will test you. Some of the first questions the judge asks is, so who are you? They're not asking, hey, are you Amy? They're saying, do you know who you are and which jurisdiction are you standing in? Because then I have to know which hat to wear to deal with you. And they will test you every single step of the way. And I was speaking to another gentleman the other day who was trying to help somebody in a court case who has some little bit of information about this. But the judge even said, it's not my jurisdiction, but I'll let it proceed anyway. And she stopped to see if he knew how to respond to that. All he had to say in that moment was, well, if it's not your jurisdiction, let's have a nice day. But he didn't know what to say. And she proceeded. It was an offer to see if he knew how to stand in that moment.
Trickery.
It's
Wow.
trickery. So everywhere, even when she said to him, Mr. Such and Such, so you're Mr. Such and Such on this document. No, he's not. Mr. is another one of their languages, their legalese. It's a prefix. But when you were born, you were never called Mr. or Mrs. You were given your given name. That's who you are.
Male, female?
So yeah, male, female. So all these things are down to the minutia that they know, and they've been doing it. If you just know this, anybody who sits behind that bench, they had two things. One, they've had to at least been a practicing bar attorney for, should be at least 5 years plus. And then they get promoted, usually appointed, and they get tested to know this stuff. And number two, once they sit behind that bench in the bar system, they can never go back to being an attorney. Why? Because they know the secrets of the game. And with that, they can use it for their own personal gain. And that'll mess up the entire system. So it's like a club. And as George Collins says, you're not in it, but they'll pull you in. Unless you know how to stand, you're going to get wrapped up in it. So that's why you remember who you are spiritually, and then you know your essence and your substance, and then you don't have to create an agreement with them, a contract, and you can still play.
Right. Now, in that, what Jay was saying is, I want you to pay attention to one thing. Whenever you go into a courtroom, even go into a hospital, would you consider that to be a kingdom of heaven where it feels so good? Hey, there's no plants anywhere around. There's no life anywhere around. There's no beautiful music. There's nothing at all that would lend to being full of life and full of God consciousness. It's very cold, and that's cold on purpose to try to pull you out of your kingdom of heaven. That's why it's essential to be inner here and nothing able to pull you out. So no matter what's going on the outside, you remain in the kingdom of heaven. That's where your music's playing. There's plants all over. There's life all around. You see what I mean? So even that, and of course we know that the robes that the judge wears are Luciferian, and it comes from ancient ceremonies that they actually do continue to do today. And it's all based on Luciferian consciousness. It's just crazy. Ananda, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I do. And even the way the judge sits is above you so that we're below. The whole setup is created. And it's interesting that they wear black robes. Many of the priests wear black robes. They're participating in Luciferian rituals, if you will, or Freemasonry. Some knowingly, some not knowingly. It's estimated about 60% of the higher, like, judicial system is participating in Freemasonry. So they will communicate with each other. There was a bailiff who was sharing that there was ring tapping going on. And he's like, what's up with the attorney doing this ring tapping? And the ring tapping was alerting the fellow brethren from the private club that, hey, I need the verdict to go in my favor here, because the bailiff, over, I think it was 18 years, he was witnessing innocent people getting locked up and absolute criminals walking free. And then he started asking the lawyers, oh, what is this ring you're wearing? And then he was able to figure it out. So I was very inspired by both the gentlemen's what they were talking about. And so I just want to just come back to Friends of the Court. Krista mentioned Friends of the Court, and also that the court never does anything wrong. And there's two things here. When we come in as Friends of the Court, that was created, I think it was in the late 40s, around 1946, by the Zionists. And what that is, it's amicus. And what they did is they created, I call them the Nefarians, because it's a whole group. And we know that there's all different sects of these dark ones.
True.
They're dark players with their own agendas.
I like that.
But
I like that, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. The Nefarians. So the Nefarians came in and they created Friends of the Court so that they could have an out. As Jason always says, they always, in every contract, there's an out. They give you a way out. When the judge was trying to trick the one, well, that's not my jurisdiction, but I'll allow it. Trick. There's always a way out. Right there, there was a way out. But, if you're not versed in it, it'd be easy to not see it. It's like, oh, I could have just said, well, let's conclude and have a nice day. So when the Nefarians are doing that, they did that for their out when they come as Friends of the Court. Now they have neutralized the situation and they're not found guilty. They're not found innocent because they're not playing and they're Friends of the Court. So when we say that the courts do nothing wrong, it's actually a true statement. It's kind of like I had a father. My dad was assistant attorney general for the state of Washington, and it was a lawyer household, a lot of lawyer language. And whenever I would go to argue with dad, I was always wrong. Whether I was right or wrong, I was wrong. That's kind of the same as the courts because it's father knows best. The judge is playing God. Remember, Jay said that it's a mirrored image of God's law, right? So they've taken something pure and then they've twisted and turned it. Even the name attorney is to twist and turn to make it something other than what it is. So now they're playing God, right? The big G, government, God, right? When the father knows best, you're at a disadvantage because actually father does know best. And if you don't know who you are, you're going to identify with that all caps name, and then they will be able to
Well, you're cutting out.
you because you're not grown up in that because you haven't claimed your minor state.
So if you, it's like if
when they don't do
you're
anything wrong, it's a real thing because when we look at the birth certificate, which is a trust, the court have the same job. And that is to protect and defend the trust. So when they're acting as they act, they're acting to protect and defend the trust. So they're not doing anything wrong. Because we could be a pirate coming in trying to claim something that's not rightfully ours. So they've been given a directive by the state to protect that, and they will do anything in their power to protect the trust. So that's why if you don't know who you are, they're doing everything they can to make sure that you don't get something that's not rightfully yours. But once you know who you are, they go, oh, they know who she is. Amy knows who she is. She has standing. She has standing. So that hopefully that helps shed a little light.
Yeah, it, like from their perspective, they're not wrong.
Well, that's right. Everything they do in this court system, they're doing it perfectly. And we even thank them. The judge is really the trustee, and we are really the beneficiary. How they have it set up is that they make us the trustee, which makes us actually responsible for any fines that come in or what have you. And that's not accurate. So we got to make sure that we change that we're the beneficiary. Judge, you are the trustee. Thank you for doing such a great job. I think there's an attack on the trust. Would you vet this attack on the trust? Meaning an attack on the trust could be a citation, could be trying to extort you with some sort of funds, whatever. That's an attack on the trust. Please vet that. And if it's true, handle it through the trust. Thank you so very much. Done deal. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So you guys, I know that a lot of people watching, at least I used to have the preconceived notion that going the way you guys go doesn't work. It doesn't, you don't have success that way. So can you guys give maybe an example or two of some instances where this absolutely completely worked, when somebody was already caught up in their world and they were able to get out of it?
Let's do the medical person in California. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so the medical person in California was for several years, they were trying to shut down his business. So they sent in a plant to accuse him and his business of doing some sexual inappropriate actions because of the
Mm.
nature of his business, which of course was all fraud. So prior to meeting us, he was going through the system, hiring an attorney, paying tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, up to like $30,000-$40,000 for the attorney, dragging it on with all these different things within the court system. You mean motions and hearings and blah blah blah, all these things to the tune of 2.5, 3 years. And of course, just draining his pocketbook. And of course, oh, we have no resolution yet, or oh, this, or oh, that, and so on and so forth, because they're making money over hand and fist with them. So with that, the leverage that they had on him was the fact that he was in the system and he gave up a right and converted it into a privilege. And that privilege is defined by his medical license that he had at that
Oh.
time. Because if you remember, the only way that they can create in their world is through that which they control. The only way they can control it is if you volunteer to have them control it. The only way they control it is through a nexus. That nexus could look like a mortgage or a license because you have to apply for that. You have to apply for a license, which means you're
Jay,
giving up.
define the nexus. Define it for the people.
Nexus in the most simplest term is a bridge, a connection, right? And it's your consent, right? It's in a physical form, it would be a contract. It would be a driver's license. Your driver's license is the nexus that, unless you know who you are, it's assumed, and you look on any driver's license, any of your listeners here today can go into their wallet, look at their driver's license, and it's an all caps name. And they have a signature on that. That signature validates the all caps name, and it converts that very moment. It converts your unalienable right inherent within you to travel, and it converts that inherent right of traveling into driving. It changes the language. So that license is the nexus between you being a free living man or woman and then being a slave in the Babylonian empire of commerce. So with our doctor friend, the license to do business in their Babylonian empire was his medical license, which opened it up for him to go into the courts, even though they planted a bait to contract him in to drain funds and to destroy him because he's doing healing work. Right. And so finally he came to us and we looked at everything and we said, okay, step number one, you have to terminate your relationship with that power of attorney that you gave your sovereignty away to this guy called an attorney who was draining funds from him and not getting any resolution, because now there's no nexus between him and the court. The attorney is the nexus between him and the court. He's speaking on the doctor's behalf, so the doctor has no power, right? And if the attorney is in cahoots with the court because they're all in the same club, then of course it's a conflict of interest for the attorney to actually be in favor of his client, right? So you have to delete that nexus. Then we did this all administratively, mind you, all administratively. Then the main thing was for him to surrender that entire nexus, which means you have to get out of that system. Therefore, you no longer are going to have that license. It's a change of life. It's a change of consciousness. It's a change of paradigm. But don't worry, you were gifted and blessed with this healing power from your creator. So go into the private and use different language and exercise the gift that you were given to heal and call it something different. In other words, don't give up your right to a privilege and give your power away to Babylon where they can control you. Use your gifts that God gave you in a private PMA style and delete that bridge, which is what we did. And they went away. They didn't go away quietly. It took some time, but eventually, because there's an administrative process, remember it's negotiation. And little Johnny in the sandbox gets really upset if you don't want to play in his sandbox. So he'll keep throwing stuff at you to try to bring it back. And you have to say, you dropped your shovel over here, you can have it back. Right? We're not saying we're trying to destroy the sandbox. You can have your sandbox. I'm going in the private and I'm going to go do what I'm gifted to do, whether it's traveling privately in my private automobile or doing some healing work or whatever it is, creating certain things and using different language that doesn't create that bridge for Babylon, but you're still doing what you were born to do. And now that's what we helped him with. So that's one very potent example in a very corrupt state of California where this process, and it took time, but ultimately, now it's been over almost a year, he hasn't been bothered since, and he's free doing what he was born to do freely because we eliminated that bridge, that nexus, and now he's doing what he was born to do. And that's one example, and it can go on a microcosmic level and all the different things.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing that you need to know is that with that, there's certain responsibilities that you have to stay conscious with. But can you imagine their experience? They're amazing people that 3 years, $80,000 later and nothing being done. It's still going on. And all of a sudden, he found out about us. And then we started to counsel with him and assist him. And he did it so well that now he's living free in the kingdom of heaven. Yay. And that's why they're freaking out, because of the fact that there's no way that they can be successful when the truth of God or kingdom of heaven comes forth, and utilizing forms in order to make that happen administratively. It's just phenomenal. Amy, we're getting close. We have another Zoom happening. And so we would love to do this again, though. We just enjoyed being with you.
Please. That'd be wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh, you guys are just, thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for the way that you're helping everybody. And anybody, please go to their website or you guys go ahead and tell the audience what you'd like them to know about what you guys are doing.
Well, americansinaction.info. And if you ever are in a situation where you seem to can't get out of it, or it's not working, or you have a bar attorney and you're not winning, give us a call or email us, and we'll look at the situation and we'll let you know how we can assist you. And it's just really phenomenal. It becomes fun when you really rediscover who you are. That's everything. Isn't that wonderful? And so we do that. And then we also have a beautiful book called The Dictionary That Can Save Your Life. And I just happen to have one here. And and so with that, this is all the legalese that they use to trick you. And it's very important for you to realize how you could possibly be tricked. But of course, again, just like Jay was saying, we do everything administratively, so you never have to step in that courtroom again. Isn't that amazing? And with what we teach and everything else, we vet it and we live it. So we have utilized this information with our own situations, and it's just so much fun to live in the private and to be get out of being a ward of the state. That's why we urge everybody to look into repudiation and getting out of being that ward of the state. And we all realize that happens when your mom signed the birth certificate, so forth and so on, and they made the trust. So we have so much more. We probably could do this about 10 times and still didn't cover everything, But thank you.
I'd be happy to do that. Let's do it 10 times.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, you too, guys. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Blessing.
Bye.
Bye.